Hi, this is Ken Adams, and welcome to this edition of the Valley View. And this week I'm joined by Chuck Sheketoff of the Oregon Center for Public Policy. Welcome to the show, Chuck.
It's great to be here.
Maybe you could start the show by explaining a little bit about what the Oregon Center for Public Policy is all about and how did it get started.
Sure. Well, the Center is a nonprofit, nonpartisan public policy research institute that focuses on fiscal issues, budget and tax policy, and economic issues important to low and middle income Oregonians. We're a little think tank. Our offices are in Silverton, and we provide information to policymakers, lawmakers, members of the administration, lobbyists, and other civically engaged Oregonians who are analyzing budget policy, tax policy, or economic policy.
And so you have people over at the Capitol on a regular basis?
We're there a lot during legislative session. We're not there all the time. We do a lot of our work sort of in the background. Legislators will contact us and ask for an analysis of bills or policy ideas, or other lobbyists will, but we do some direct lobbying. We publish reports and fact sheets and papers. We've tended to go from having long reports to shorter ones, more digestible, and they're all available on our website, which is at OCPP for Oregon Center for Public Policy.org. Our tagline is "Because Facts Matter," and you can actually go to becausefactsmatter, all one word.org, and you'll get to us. We were started by used to be before this, a lobbyist with legal services on human services and tax policy issues. And a number of human service advocates and myself got together and got the organization going. We were getting up early in the morning and calling smart people in Washington, D.C. saying, how many poor children need health care in Oregon? And we realized we should get something going here that we could do that ourselves. And so I have policy analysts on my staff who are able to go through government and other survey data and know the policies and the laws and make recommendations.
You know, over the last, say, like 30, 35 years, there's been this thing about cutting taxes, income taxes especially. And it hasn't led to any kind of significant income increase for most average Oregonians or Americans, for that matter. And is that a correct analysis of what I'm looking at?
Well, the taxes in some people's mind is a four-letter word. They're sort of a necessary thing to fund the public structures that we rely on every day, from schools to fire departments to health care and care for the frail and elderly and children and whatnot. And the problem that we've had is a lot of is when we see tax cut proposals, we look at who's getting the benefit from them. Is it businesses or individuals, the corporations or small businesses? Is it the wealthy, or is it middle income and low income families? And too often, unfortunately, the tax cuts have favored the wealthy, putting more on the middle class and low income, or they've let corporations off the hook, and that's been a big problem in Oregon.
Yeah, well, one of the things I remember from the 80s was that President Reagan gave a lot of tax cuts, and they ended up with a shortfall.
And well, he also raised taxes in the 1986 Tax Act.
Yeah, but one of the things, though, that helped make up for that was that he claimed that all us baby boomers getting ready to retire needed to pay more into Social Security to fund our payout when we turned 65. And so my Social Security taxes went from a few $100s a year to a few $1,000s a year during the 80s. And now that I've retired, now they're talking about, well, we need to, cut back on these entitlements. And it seems like, I don't want to say bait and switch, but it seems like, okay, you said one thing and now you gave the money away, but we're still going to make you pay for it.
Well, you don't always get the promises, or what they say is their motivation doesn't always play out. In Social Security, there's a cap. This year, I think it's about $117,000. So someone who makes $500,000 is only paying Social Security taxes on that first 117. The families who are people who are earning up to 117 are really getting the short end of the stick, because the wealthy should be paying more. And if they did, if they got rid of that cap, Social Security would be even more solvent than it is, and it's quite solvent. But the real issue is when you see and hear politicians say, "Oh, we are taxing business too much. We need to reduce the taxes on business." Well, that's just a shift. Someone has to pick up that cost. So, for instance, in Oregon, in the 1970s, corporations paid a little over 18%, almost one out of 5 tax dollars, income tax dollars in the state. So if there were 100 horses pulling the state, 20 of them were corporations. Well, now they're only paying about 7% of our income taxes. So what does that mean? That means households are having to pick up the load. The number of, the costs for government continue even though they're getting out of their responsibility. So it's really just a tax shift. That's what a lot of the tax cuts have been. It's really just a shift to someone else, because we still have to pay for the vital public services that Oregonians demand and rely upon every day.
Well, also you have situations where they've given tax breaks to large corporations, like I can think of Nike, that they gave a huge tax break to, so they wouldn't supposedly leave the state. But how effective are those?
Well, a lot of the corporate tax breaks don't have good provisions that would even tie a job to the tax break. And then even those that try to tie jobs to them don't do a very good job of tying the quality of that job, the pay and benefits that it would be. So in the case of Nike's benefit, what they got in that special session deal was a promise for 30 years we won't change the way we tax you under our corporate income tax, as far as how we apportion your profits to Oregon and how we do that. But that was a tax break that was basically solidifying for 30 years a deal that was done when Governor Kitzhaber was first governor, and then
that was quite some time ago.
Yeah, it was sort of phased in. It was started by Governor Kitzhaber on a phase-in level, and then Governor Kulongoski made it permanent. And what it did was it said, in looking at a company like Nike, or a company like Intel, or any company that sells in multiple parts of the country, you have to decide what portion of its U.S. profits does Oregon get to tax. And so it used to say, well, let's look at what percentage of their property is in Oregon, add to that the percentage of their payroll in Oregon, and add to that the percentage of their sales. You add those three up, you divide by 3, and that's the percentage of their U.S. profits we get to tax. Well, then we switched it back in the early 90s, we switched it to throwing that sales factor in twice, called double-weighted sales. So you add those 3 percentages up, put sales in, so you're really putting in 4 percentages. You divide by 4, and that tells you what it is. Well, what Governor Kulongoski and Governor Kitzhaber did is they said, no, we're only going to look at what percentage of their sales here. It doesn't matter. We don't want to tax calculate their profits in Oregon based on their payroll or their property. Well, Nike's a great example. Nike, its property, we went and tried to calculate how much did they save on that, and they're saving over 90% of their taxes as a result of it. The reason
90%?
90%. The reason for that is, if you look at, we looked at, and this is on our website, if you go to the keyword Nike, you'll find the Nike example. The reason is their property here is significant relative to the rest of the country. Their payroll here is significant relative to the rest of the country, but their sales are probably only about 2% of their sales. Oregon's about 1% of the national economy, a little greater than 1%, about 1.4%. Well, they're now, Nike, so let's say Nike sales are 2% of their U.S. sales are in Oregon. Maybe say we're more loyal. Well, let's say we're more loyal and we have more runners than other places. Well, they, if you're only looking at 2% of their U.S. profits versus throwing in 75% of their payroll or 75 or 50% of their property into the equation, you lower what percentage of Nike's tremendous profits we get to tax in Oregon. So we didn't change the tax rate. We just were saying how much of their U.S. profits can Oregon tax, or what's called apportioned to Oregon. That's how they got out of it. Intel Corporation, back in the 90s, Intel Corporation disclosed their corporate taxes. They let the state confirm it. They let the state confirm, because it's confidential information, that they were the #1 corporate income taxpayer. And they were paying 18% of Oregon's corporate income taxes. They were paying $50 million a year. It was in the Oregonian multiple years. It was in studies they released. Because of this move to only looking at the sales factor, Intel is paying 0, or our corporate minimum tax, which would mean the most they'd pay is $100,000. But I don't think they have any sales in Oregon. You can't go to, even though they have the largest workforce here, we're about 16 to 17,000 people, you can't go to their Hillsborough facility and buy anything here. Their product there all gets shipped to another state or another country. It's not an Oregon sale.
Well, yeah, because the chips that go into computers are probably sent to China.
Well, they may go to China ultimately. They may go to Nevada first and then to China. There's a whole bunch of ways they can do it. I just know that they're not paying any. They're probably not paying any taxes, and sort of proof of that, or reason of proof of the suspicion, is they no longer boast about how much they pay in taxes. They used to boast about it. So that's shifted. So when if we were collecting 18%, we're now down to about 7%. If we changed the system and got corporate Oregon back up to 18, our state budget would have $2 billion more money. $2 billion more. We'd be able to fully fund education. We'd be able to make college education affordable for people. That's a lot of money.
And that's a very important thing, actually making college affordable, because to me, the new economy needs to rely on people that are highly skilled and have college education. And, in making Oregon a place where employers want to move to, having an educated workforce and a good infrastructure is something that's very critical.
Well, it is very critical. My two examples are when Intel came here, and if you go to our website and you put in Milk Matters, you'll find these documents. When Intel came here, in the 70s, they said, we're coming to Oregon because it has a K-to-life education system. I've never heard anyone else refer to our education system back then or now. And here in Salem, Garmin a number of years ago expanded their facility at the airport. A lot of people don't realize there's a Garmin facility at the airport, the maker of GPS machines and those things for UPS drivers, where they know that you signed for the package at your house, right? Garmin's facility here in Salem expanded, and they got a little bit of government money to help them with that, and there was a ribbon cutting, and the manager there at that facility said, we'd like being in Salem because we're close to OSU, Oregon State University. We get good engineers. Mm-hmm. They need a skilled workforce. That's what the business climate, that's what's key to a business climate. And so that's why they need to be paying their fair share. The problem we have is that too many of the corporations, again, sadly, Intel's sort of the poster child for this, they complain that we don't have a good enough education system, but they're not willing to pay the taxes to help make it so. So let me one other. I hope I'm not overwhelming, but let me give you another example.
It's frustrating.
It's frustrating. So, for instance, voters back in 2009 raised the corporate minimum tax. That was $10. It was $10 since 1931 or so, and 2/3 of the corporations were paying it. We changed the corporate income tax and made it $150 up to $100,000 based on the amount of sales they have in Oregon. It's an alternative tax. You figure out their tax under the current system where we look at profits. You let them take some tax credits. If they get down to 0, you then say, they get down, then you compare it with the minimum tax, and they pay the greater of the two. Okay, so what happened though is a corporation named Conway. You've probably seen their trucks on the highway. Conway went to court and said, well, we have these tax credits. We bought tax credits. They bought some energy tax credits, and they said, we haven't used them all. So we should be able to use those against the minimum tax. Regrettably, the Supreme Court said, you know what, the law is not well written, and it looks like you can. So they now have created what we call, affectionately, the Conway loophole. And in the last report by the State Revenue Department, something like 8 corporations lowered their taxes by using tax credits. 24 of those corporations paid zero and had profits in excess of $5 million. And so,
such a deal.
right, and then some of them had profits in excess of $5 million. You know, so you have these profitable companies paying nothing in corporate income taxes because of a loophole in the law.
And the legislature is not interested in
They
writing
haven't
a better
yet.
law?
We're trying to get them to do that. That's one of the reasons the Oregon Center for Public Policy exists, is to try to get them to close things like the Conway loophole that a bad court decision created.
Well, and the court was citing that the law was written not well enough. And so why wasn't there some impetus then to fix the law so that it was written correctly?
Good question. You know, there's some powerful interests. We don't know the names of the corporations benefiting from it other than Conway, because they sued, and there's powerful interests who don't want the legislature to fix that. And you know, I think that it's a problem. So you know, we have some legislators who are turning in bills for next session. It happened before the 2013 session ended. They didn't fix it. They went into 2014, ignored it still, and it's continuing to cost us. And hopefully the 2015 session will close the loophole.
But that's a hope. That's okay. So
everything with the legislature is a hope.
So how does Oregon compare to other states?
Sure, great question. So you know, first of all, taxes are not a factor in corporate decisions generally. State and local taxes are nationwide are 0.8% of the cost of doing business. Payroll and other things. That's why Intel came here, is because we had a good workforce, we had a K-to-life education system, we had clean water, we had property, we had a whole bunch of other reasons why companies locate places. But when you look at taxes, you really don't apply in Oregon because we're the lowest in the nation. And so if you go to our website and put in COST, C-O-S-T, or go to cost.org, the Council on State Taxation. The Council on State Taxation is an offshoot of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. They formed it. It's now a separate entity. And it's 500 or more approximately large corporations, some of the largest ones in Oregon are members of it, whose job it is to lobby state legislatures around the country to have lower corporate taxes. And they do an annual study of what's the tax level among all the states. And of all the different studies comparing states, theirs is probably the best. It's a little bit of a black box. They don't totally disclose
how they arrived at
right, all their methodology, but they discuss it enough that you can say, and the state legislative revenue office has agreed with us, it's probably the best of the different comparisons, and it shows that our corporate tax burden is the lowest, and we continue to be very low. And so, you know, it's been that way for years. And so, you know, it's taxes are not keeping businesses out. Oregon's economy is actually thriving. Another thing you don't hear from the business community is just how good we have it here. We have one of the fastest growths in income in per capita personal income. We have one of the fastest growths in gross domestic product. We have one of the fastest growths in productivity. We're doing very well here in Oregon. So gross per capita personal income has gone up significantly, but gross state product, which is the state equivalent of gross domestic product, was second only to North Dakota in our growth on a per capita basis and overall. Productivity gains tremendous. The problem is those gains are making so that the wealthy are doing quite well, thank you, and everyone else is being left behind. But our economy is doing well. You know, we have, yes, our unemployment's higher than the national average, but it's been higher than the national average for all but 5 out of the last 41 or 42 years.
Well, for a long time, Oregon counted on natural resources for employment in forestry and agriculture and things like that, which always then causes problems when you have various cycles going on.
That's right, but we still, you know, there's still natural resources still a big part, and that's one of the
Right.
reasons why we are still, and probably almost always will be, above the national average. It should be front page news when we're not. When you only do that 5 out of 41 or 42 years, that should be the front page news, not the news that, oh, once again we're above the national average. It's sort of like, once again the Cubs didn't win the series, right? It's not news if they don't.
It's not. No. Now, also, I would think too, when we're talking about companies relocating, they're not going to relocate necessarily from, say, like Georgia to Oregon. We're really in competition with the states around us, I would think. Like Washington, California, maybe Idaho. And
to some degree, I mean, you're in competition for a variety of reasons with different states. Geldwin Corporation, the largest wood products manufacturer in the country that has its headquarters in Klamath Falls, they wanted to open a domestic headquarters, and they put it in the East Coast where they were close to the headquarters of both Lowe's and Home Depot, right?
Right.
Because people at headquarters have to deal with the people at those other headquarters. The insurance industry, the reason Hartford, Connecticut's the insurance capital of America is because it was the farthest place up the Connecticut River boats could go, before they would then reload stuff to take it on the road to upstate New York, and they had to reinsure it, and that's why there's insurance companies there, like the Travelers and the Hartford. And so, there's other reasons of why businesses locate where they are. But we do compete with California, and we've gotten businesses to move here from California. We compete with everybody around the country, essentially.
Okay.
If there's often good reasons for businesses to locate here. If you want to be in a community that has a vibrant advertising agency, creative advertising agency, you come to Oregon because we have Wyden and Kennedy anchoring a pretty vibrant advertising agency. We have a Silicon Forest that was started not by Intel, by Tektronix, and we have a big software industry. So there's reasons why people will come to Oregon separate from anything having to do with
geographical.
taxes.
Yeah.
But they also want to have good schools. When our schools are on the front page of the New York Times with short school year or laying off teachers or whatnot, that does more damage to our business climate than sort of almost anything else. Businesses want to have a place where their workers will be happy, can get paid well and have good services, and they can keep their workforce, that the workforce isn't always looking to go somewhere else.
So their kids can get a good education.
Their kids can get a good education, their employees can get a good education.
Right.
Garmin likes getting engineers from OSU.
Well, that is a good selling point for Oregon then.
It's a very good selling point.
So what are some of the other issues that you see coming out, like in these elections that we're seeing this year, that you think maybe people need more information about?
Well, I think it's unfortunate that in sort of across the board legislative races and the gubernatorial race, that the issue of does Oregon have enough revenue to fund what the services people want has sort of been off the table. The politicians seem to bend over backwards not to discuss that. So that's a little bit frustrating. I think that the minimum wage issue is an important one. I think there's going to probably be some move in the legislature to do something on that. We're hopeful there is. I think there's recognition that while Oregon certainly has a better minimum wage than most of the rest of the country, it's still not enough that if you're working and have family, you shouldn't be poor.
Well, I think it's, even if you're single and working, it's sometimes pretty inadequate.
It's inadequate to be able to get by, that's right. The minimum wage is not a basic wage.
No.
It's just a floor, below which people would pay if we didn't have that standard, and there's certainly no shortage of companies trying to be hard on low-income workers. It was just in the paper this week that a sandwich shop chain in this country is trying to get its sandwich makers to sign non-compete clauses. So if they leave their minimum wage job wrapping sandwiches for that company, they're not allowed to go to another minimum wage job wrapping sandwiches. I mean, it just makes no sense. But that's the problem.
Well, yeah, and I remember reading an article in the last few days that was talking about Walmart is trying to cut some of their workers' salaries, which to me is really kind of crazy, because mostly what they have working for them are low-wage people who are trying to get by, and now you're cutting their ability to buy things in your store.
Right. I mean, Nick Hanauer is a venture capitalist in Seattle, has written about how the great job creators are those who are building up the middle class, because you have to have demand for your products. And everyone knows Henry Ford, paid his employees well so they could afford the vehicles that they were making, right? And so the Walmart strategy of race to the bottom doesn't make any good economic sense, and it's one of the reasons we have high income inequality in this country. We have a stubborn poverty rate, and that's unfortunate.
And we've also had a number of like jobless recoveries after various little recessions or dips in the economy. It's like the jobs don't come back, and that to me is kind of a critical issue that I don't see them really addressing.
Right, and the jobs don't come back, but one of the things that they're really not addressing is how do you create one of the best ways for government as a player in the economy, it's not separate from the economy, is to invest in infrastructure. And there's tremendous infrastructure needs in this country, from roads and bridges to government buildings that need weatherization and the like, that public buildings like schools and whatnot. And that's where the money should go, and those would be good paying jobs. Just investing in infrastructure would be tremendous.
And also thinking about future energy supplies, maybe trying to transition a little away from fossil fuels into other methods, like wind farms and things of that nature. That would also be a big infrastructure gain. And
yeah, some of it is. We put a lot of tax dollars into supporting the wind industry in this state that I'm not so sure is the best spent dollars. The energy isn't staying in the state in large part, and it's not really that many jobs once it gets up and operating. Right. I think you get a better bang for the buck if you put your dollars into insulating and retrofitting all the buildings that need it.
And there's quite a few.
There's quite a few.
And so, you mentioned your website as a place for people to get information. Right. And you can also sign up via email to get regular...
You can sign up for what we call our email updates. It says Stay Informed at the upper right corner of every page at ocpp.org. And you'll get a confirming email. Please respond to that, otherwise you're stuck in email purgatory. And whenever we publish new materials or giving certain speaking events and whatnot, we send out a brief email to tell people about it. And everything we publish is available on our website.
And you have speakers come in periodically.
Right, and there's a little button on our website to request a speaker. We go out and talk to community groups, and that's a big part of our work.
Well, Chuck, I want to thank you for coming in and sharing this information with us, because I think it's something that voters really kind of need to know about before they vote. And the ballots are going out today, tomorrow, and so I'm hoping that by the time they get the ballots, they'll have watched this show and have a little bit better fix on it.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Well, and this has been the Valley View, and tune in next time.